Birthday gift.
So, good morning, my friends. How are you doing? All good? Sleep well? All right. So, we have the pleasure to have the presentation from the side of the American University in Armenia that will be talking about circular economy in the power section, very much in line to the things we discussed. We talked about circular economy in mining yesterday, if you remember. I hope you do. But today we see the concepts, but applied to different perspectives. So that's very useful for enhancing our understanding of the kind of things we are dealing with. So then in the afternoon, then we have Giuseppe Munda talking about social multi-criteria decision analysis, which is a tool that will help us very much in making the kind of decisions that we talked about yesterday. You could appreciate the difficulties in using all these criteria that were given to you, and there are many things to consider. And then in the afternoon, we will have the presentation from Kristin Gilling from Sweden. She will talk about sustainability and circularity in the context of decommissioning. So you can make a parallel between what was told about these things on the scope of remediation, and she will provide the perspectives in terms of decommissioning, and then you will be able to ask all the questions in terms of specificities as the things we discuss, whether decommissioning is dismantling, demolition, decontamination, where are the boundaries, so you're going to have this perspective. On that note, more on the side of a social aspect, just to get us together, the gathering on Monday was really very nice, and once again, I'd like to thank Alan and the organizers for providing that opportunity. So, but that was a sponsor event, and what we are proposing, discussing with Giuseppe and Catanel, that we might get together tonight for a non-host, non-sponsor dinner in a restaurant that will be accessible for us, right? That will not give any pain in your pockets, in our pockets. And what I will do, yesterday we went to a very nice restaurant and very reasonable price, but more important is that we can get together, we can have a nice time, we can make friendship, partnerships that hopefully will last for many years to come, right? So I will be running a list, and those who will be willing to join, just put your name in the list, and then we will provide you more details about where and when we're gonna meet, possibly around 7 o'clock, okay? And nearby the hotel, so it makes it easy for everybody to reach. With that said, and without further ado, I give the floor to Alan, and thank you, your colleagues as well, to contribute to this training course. Highly appreciated on behalf of the agency. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. This has been a pretty intense week for us, and we do a lot of this, so it's especially rewarding for us to be learning so much as we're doing it also, because this is not a sector we're very deeply involved in, at least at the Acopian Center for the Environment, not from this perspective, and certainly not from a nuclear power perspective. So we are learning a lot, and I want to thank all of you for providing that learning opportunity to us, but also creating that learning opportunity for each other. I am going to do a very broad overview of two concepts: circular economy, which Kostas has already talked about, and another link, trying to link it to another concept, planetary boundaries, which I believe we have not discussed. In the talks that I've attended, we haven't discussed. I hope it's not repetitious. And so this gives somewhat of a context. And then my colleagues, Artin Alpetian from our center, who works a lot on circularity issues, will talk about certain small sector of the power sector, but high impact sector in terms of consumer products and also industrial products that have impact on the environment. And then our colleague from the World Bank Armenia office, Gor Khachaturian, who focuses on the energy sector, will talk about projects specifically done in Armenia on high voltage power systems and other power generation projects, and how the concepts of circularity are being introduced in those projects and initiatives and sector, if you will. And of course, that will necessarily imply some legislative work, because legislation may not be amenable to to circularity in the sector. So before, in terms of context, I'm going to read the statements. Raise your hand if you agree with them. There is much more human beings on the planet now than ever before, and it's growing. Who agrees with this? Who disagrees with this? Who is asleep? Okay. Yes, and of course we know the numbers. How old is the human species, Homo sapiens? That's very conservative. Homo sapiens specifically, not the genus Homo. 10,000. 10,000 is the Neolithic era. The Holocene started 10,000 years ago. 200,000, 200,000 to 300,000 years is how old our species is. So we're very young. I mean, in the history of this planet, in the history of life on the planet, we just arrived, right? But we have been extremely aggressive as a species, right? And we've been able to organize ourselves, the agricultural revolution, invention of writing, urbanization, which created political structures, which was able to, as a species, to be able to advance our interests aggressively and significantly. All of that happened in the last 10,000 years. Just astounding, right, what we've achieved as a species. But it's also like cancer rate, the way we've been growing, right? So we went from about 5 to 10 million population on the planet in 10,000 years ago to now 8 billion, right? And the growth rate pretty much happened from the 16th century on, massive growth, right? And of course, the Industrial Revolution had something to do with it, and the post-war decolonization, and all the development work that has impacted social well-being has had a role in that population growth. And then the explosion especially happens after the Second World War, right? Almost doubles the population after the Second World War, if not more. We live longer. Who agrees with that? Okay, it's a tricky question. You have to ask, well, compared to what, right? Yes, very good. So historically, up until the mid-19th century, we used to live 40, 50 years. 30, 40 years actually was the average human lifespan, right? From there on, now we're up to about 70 years. So we've doubled our life expectancy. So we're also wealthier, right? Anyone agrees? Do you think we're better off economically now than we were 200 years ago? Very much so. I mean, life was hard 200 years ago, right? I mean, economic, material comforts that we take for granted, they just weren't there, right? But of course, all of this, and I won't go through it, but I have all supporting, what I believe is supporting evidence. But you can definitely, this will be available for you. You can go through it if you're interested. And all of this, of course, has come at a cost, right? At a cost on stress on the planet and the resources that the planet has to offer us. So I won't go through these, but I just want to highlight this one point. If you look at the global poverty rate, right? 1980, this is around the time I entered college, undergraduate. Okay, I'm old. But about 40% of the population was, 42% of the population was in extreme poverty. Today, it's less than 10%. Just astounding, right? And at the same time, the population has grown significantly. Right? And in all measures of poverty, even if you take $5.50 per day, we see that, especially in the 2000s, we see a decline in poverty rate. And so when the SDG 1 says end to poverty by 2030, okay, we might not reach it, but extreme poverty is what mostly they're talking about. So $1.90 extreme poverty. It seems like it's reachable. We've done significant progress. So it doesn't seem too out of the whack. And of course, I have to mention one of my heroes, Hans Rosling. How many of you have known Hans Rosling? He was a physician, a professor of international health at Karolinska Institute in Sweden, a master of storytelling with data. Just amazing how he clarified the world with data. And used data to clear misconceptions and also establish this Gapminder Foundation. And for instance, in 1800, the year 1800, all the countries that we know now, of course, not all of them existed back then, but if you project back, all of the countries that we know now, of course, the big one on top is China, the smaller one in the bottom is India, and that they still have remained the same significant role in human population. The size of the bubble is the size of the population. Pretty much all the countries on a per capita basis, and this is inflation and purchasing power parity adjusted. So this is the same dollars we would be spending today, would be the per capita income back in 1800. So everyone was, as Hans would say, poor and sick in the 1800s. They were in that corner. To be rich and healthy, you would have to be in the top right-hand corner, right? So, and now today, this is the picture we have, pretty much. So at least in life expectancy, everyone has gone up significantly. And also a lot of progress for many, many countries on income per capita GDP. And I would highly recommend this book that he and his son and daughter-in-law wrote, Factfulness, if you haven't read it. It's easy read, but it just opens up the world. By the way, he often, what he did in his talks was question highly educated people about facts about the world. And chimpanzees were better off answering those questions correctly than the highly educated people. Right? So he would ask, what is the fertility rate in Bangladesh? Is it up or down? And people would have some prejudice, kind of some preconception of what the fertility rate was. And in fact, it was much lower than they were thinking. Education level, same thing. So it's very important for when we're doing this kind of global thinking to really continuously look at facts, because the reality keeps changing. And when I got my education in 1980s and 1990s, the world isn't the same anymore. So we need to constantly check our reality. All right, so increased resources. And so this is the planet we have, right? It's pretty much a finite system, right? And a closed loop. Of course, we have cosmic dust. Of course, we have meteors coming in. Of course, energy is much more fluid. It comes in and some of it leaves, and so on and so forth. But overall, this is the system we have where we extract resources, transform it into economic goods, and for our livelihood and for improvement of our lives. And then once we're done with them, we have called it waste. We call it something waste, right? And some of it, of course, would have harmful levels of radioactivity, radiation. So solid, liquid, gas, heat, all those could be excessive input from human economic activity. So the idea is how to actually, and this is the linear economy, right? This is how we've been thinking. So how do you close the loop? How do you take what we call waste and put it back into resource so we can have this continuous system? And but before I get to that, let's talk about what are the stresses on the planet, planetary boundaries. How many of you are familiar with the planetary boundaries that the Stockholm Resilience Institute came up with? 1, 2, 3. So good. What they say, and this is Rockstrom and his colleagues in the late 2000s, came up with this framework they call planetary boundaries, saying this is since 15,000 years ago, the Holocene era, the planet has been in an incredibly hospitable state for life, right? And we've had enormous biodiversity, enormous, conditions of positive, conducive conditions for human beings to thrive. And we have thrived in that period. So but in the process, what we've done is have these 9 different levels at which we've impacted this planet. So if you're the pilot of this planet, spaceship Earth, as Giuseppe was mentioning yesterday, these are the things they would argue you would need to control to make sure this plane doesn't crash, this spaceship doesn't crash. Climate change, you need to keep track of it. Integrity of the biosphere, including biodiversity and ecosystem diversity. Stratospheric ozone depletion. Ocean acidification. Biogeochemical cycles, flows, and phosphorus and nitrogen being particularly the critical ones. Land system change, how land use is changing. And atmospheric aerosol, freshwater change, how we're changing the freshwater use. Atmospheric aerosol loading, so this is kind of a particulate matter that our cities and industrial activity generate, go up and mix up with water molecules, and that they have a significant impact on climate factors, and especially local climate factors. And then novel entities, POPs like persistent organic pollutants, plastics, all these things that weren't in nature. We created them, and now they're a part of the planet, and they have impact. Right? So if you look at these, where are we standing? And the latest in 2023 that came out of this, where we are standing, it shows that we're screwed, actually. Okay, this is the picture that's shown, right? We have messed up biodiversity significantly. Right? Climate change, it's not as bad as biodiversity and let's say biogeochemical flows, but it's still bad. Novel entities is out of whack. We're putting stuff in this planet, we're creating stuff and putting it in this planet that in many cases we don't even know what's going to happen with it, what would be the consequences. And of course we've messed up the nitrogen phosphorus flows significantly, and that mostly is the result of our agricultural activities, and that has huge impact on water systems and so on. And fresh water, initially they were saying it doesn't have much of an impact. It's within the bounds, and now of course they're arguing that we've crossed the boundaries. Now, for the planet if you're the pilot of the spaceship, this is where you want to be, in this safe operating space. And according to their assessment, right now only in terms of aerosol loading, ocean acidification, and stratospheric ozone depletion, these are the only processes in which we're within the safe boundaries. Everything else we've crossed. And the risk here is crossing, what they argue, the risk for the crossing this threshold is that the system becomes unpredictable. Then you're not going to be able to control the system, right, if you go beyond that level. That's kind of the argument. And there's a lot of information, data, parameters behind this, and I invite you to read it. I've cited the article in the presentation and so on. So
just for clarification, in the previous slide, freshwater chain, green, blue, what does it mean?
Green or blue water.
It's freshwater?
Yeah, it's rivers, lakes, stuff. Green water is water in vegetation.
Okay.
Right. So, and this is soil moisture, soil and vegetation. So as this freshwater availability, soil moisture goes down, and we expect it to go down with climate increasing temperatures, right? That threatens life in many ways. Yeah. So, and if this is what they started with, this is the first picture I came to know in 2009, that 7 boundaries were assessed, 3 we had crossed. Today, all 9 boundaries have been assessed, and we have crossed 6 of them according to their analysis, right? And you'll have this presentation. You can go check it out yourself. Now, this has become, planetary boundaries is now the, it's a step more than ecological footprint that Giuseppe was talking about. Ecological footprint was just one number. Politicians love it, journalists love it, it's easy to talk about. This presents a more complex world of human impact, right? But still, does it cover everything? I would argue no, particularly because this is focused on global changes. So there may be a lot of local issues that's not included. And in fact, some argue radioactive materials may be local or regional and not global in nature. So we'll kind of reflect on that in a sec. So other than this, so this is kind of the planetary boundaries. And then in 10 years ago or so, Kate Raworth from Oxford came up with this idea of donut economics. And the idea was that, okay, you have these planetary boundaries, you don't want to overshoot because then you're endangering the planet and human livelihood. But aside from planet, think about the SDGs, right? SDGs are not only about the planet, they're also about the human well-being. So he created this donut, if you will, where you want to be is this, why is it, okay, is this green space, which is the safe and just space for humanity. Because you don't want to overshoot on the planetary boundaries, and you don't want to have shortfalls on the social aspects of human life and human security and human welfare. We won't get into this. This is a whole new area. And everyone's now doing donut economics analysis of their cities, their countries, their so on. But it's also an interesting way to merge these ideas together of the SDGs and planetary boundaries, kind of putting it together. Okay. What about radioactive waste? Evidently, it's not clear where it fits. We can imagine that, of course, it has impact on biodiversity, because mining of the materials that eventually have radioactive would have land, system changes, and so on and so forth. So in 2023, the German Federal Office for Safety of Radioactive Waste Management in Berlin organized this workshop, and the impetus was that the current sustainability concepts developed in the SDGs and the planetary boundaries neglect challenges arising from production and storage of human-made radioactive materials. That was the impetus for this workshop. They wanted to think, what's the connection? So they set out to do three things. One is to identify relationships between sustainability and radioactive waste. Second, map the global nature of the challenge. And third, take first steps to determine where this human-made radioactive material as a potential planetary subcategory fits. And they argue that it should fit into the novel entities, this last component. I highly recommend, it's not a long article, it's published here, it's open access, you can just download it and read it. I highly recommend you read it because there's this is a bunch of students got together and discussed, but a very, very insightful kind of discourse, deliberation on these questions. And I believe one of the maps that Horst showed yesterday about the places of where the radioactive materials are being produced, where they're stored, where they're being used, all of those, they also mapped that globally to see what is the global nature of trying to answer this second challenge. Anyway, so I think this is a super interesting direction, and they also, one of the conclusions is that we just haven't done enough work to figure out these things out. We need to do more work, and they lay out kind of a research agenda. Okay, so so we've seen the impact of humans on the planet with respect to planetary boundaries, but the planetary boundaries doesn't talk about material footprint. I don't clearly see the material footprint component in there, and if we look at the material extraction on the planet, from the planet, in the beginning of the 20th century, human beings extracted an estimated amount of gigatons of materials, fossil fuel, ores, minerals, biomass from the planet. By 1970, that went up to 27 gigatons. By 2050, that had gone up to 84 gigatons. The estimations that by 2050 we'll get to 170 or 80 gigatons of materials extracted. And the planetary boundary doesn't talk about this. It's not an aspect that it talks about. But this is the challenge now. I mean, I don't quite know how sustainable this is because I don't have any kind of comparative to know, but it looks pretty exponential growth, quite a bit of an exponential growth, right? So the big challenge now for circular economy is how to flatten or reduce this. Then this is virgin extraction, right? Not recycling. So that's kind of the big challenge. And so for that, for instance, if you look at the global flows of materials, stocks and materials, this was, if you look at the four materials, minerals, ores, fossil fuels, and biomass, this is how they flow through the process of our economies. And they end up giving us housing, communication devices, mobility, healthcare, various services, consumables, nutrition, and big chunk of it is dispersed emissions that are dispersed, heat and particulate matter. The system then generates about 36 billion, 36 gigatons goes into the material stocks that we have, and 13 gigatons goes as waste. And there is some recycling taking place here. So waste that comes from the stock, 14.5. A lot of this goes, some of this goes also waste, but some of it is put back into the economy. So altogether, about 8.4 is returned to the economy. This was, I think, 2018, yeah. So, so this is kind of global material flows, right? So the challenge is how do we increase this, right? Because we're right now at, if you take it as a share of this total, we're only 10% recycling.
The extraction actually goes up. If you look at the same chart for 2023, the extraction goes up. It went up to 100 gigatons, but the recycling actually remained the same in absolute numbers. So the
share came down. Mm-hmm. Send me that 22.3. I wasn't able to find it. Okay, that's why he's our expert. Okay, now, so we took, like if you take 4 global systems of nutrition, built environment, manufactured goods, transport and mobility, they all have significant impact from a planetary boundary perspective. And important thing to point out that different levels of countries with different levels of development have different impacts on the system. So if we look at this here, developed countries, which they call shift countries, they account for 40% of the overshoot on climate change boundary, 27% for nitrogen, phosphorus 18%. And these emerging economies, which support the developed world, account for also significant share, like 62% of nitrogen, 60% phosphorus overloading, and so on and so forth. And the underdeveloped, the poor countries, are actually have very little impact. And that's consistent with what we know about poverty. Poor people have very little impact on the planet. It's wealthier people that have bigger impact on the planet. Right? So, but of course we want everyone from here to come to eventually to be fully developed, right? All right, so energy sector, environmental issues, of course, a resource extraction impact on land, which means biodiversity, water, etc. Emissions of sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and coal burning, and that kind of technology may lead to acid rain. Carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases, impact on climate change, and ocean acidification. These are all big impacts. What we do know about the life cycle assessment of carbon emissions for electricity generation sources, of course, coal and gas are the most polluting from a climate perspective. And then the rest, including nuclear, are relatively low. this is a life cycle. So this is from extraction to utilization to the disposal. Right? Okay, so this is what Horst presented yesterday about going from linear to circular economy. One key concept to understand in this is, and when we start talking about the circular economy, and this is an idea that came out of William McDonough's and Michael Braungart's very famous Cradle to Cradle book. It was called a book called Cradle to Cradle. And so they divided the world into two categories, the biosphere and the technosphere, right? And they coexist. Technosphere is the human-generated materials, like this is technological material, whereas biosphere would be, paper would be biosphere, food would be biosphere, etc. And this, I recommend you reading this book because it's also, it's one of the first books on the topic, which eloquently talks about the topic of circularity. It's also very poetic, so it's a nice read. And this is today what you will see with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a big kind of promoter of circular economy concepts. This butterfly chart, as they call it, what you will see. So on the biosphere, this is the process you should be looking at to create circularity. And for the technosphere, this is what you should be looking for to create circularity. And in the technosphere, people are not called consumers, they're called users. And in the biosphere, they're called consumers. And worldwide, and this is a pretty old map, 2017, I don't have a more current because it's just probably out of control by now. Everyone's developing circular economy roadmaps and strategies and so on and so forth, right? And so, and of course, the most critical one to look at for lessons learned is the EU Action Plan on Circular Economy, which is also one of the foundational documents of the Green Deal, European Green Deal. So it is, say it again? So I'm sure most of your countries and cities you're from also have developed some kind of strategy on this. So how do we think about circularity in this context? So there is the design part of it. And we need to make sure when we design something, it can be taken apart and reused. So design for circular economy is a very critical. Design for sustainability is a very critical component. When we use it, there's certain conditions we need to satisfy. And we need to extend the use as much as possible. When we're done with it, hopefully we've designed it in a way so that this can be taken apart and processed so that it can be put back into our new products and new services. That's the idea of the circular economy. Right? And again, Braungart and McDonough came up with this cradle-to-cradle certification where products and services can be certified if they do follow this cradle-to-cradle approach. And for instance, all of these seats, and there's lots of companies that now have done this. So this seat, they certify that if you are done with this seat, you want to throw it away, every part can be taken apart and recycled and reused in a new product. That's the idea of, that's how they evaluate what is. And baby diapers, how many of you have babies or have had babies? A few of you. They are poop factories, right? They generate a lot of poop that then means lots of diapers, right? So that becomes like a huge issue for the municipalities to deal with. So they came up with certified a certain product that can be composted, recycled, and kind of, or disintegrated and put back into the system effectively. And circular contracts are some methods some have used. So Los Angeles Community College District, for instance, had circular contracts on their facilities. So carpets had to be 100% recycled, ceiling tiles, these things. If your university have 50 campuses or a school system with 50 campuses, you change this every 10 years or so, then it becomes massive volume. So all of these, they had contracts where the supplier had to take it back and give them new materials. And on the carpeting contract, for instance, they said we want 30-year warranties on the carpets, but reduced materials. And also, this had to be using recycled materials, and also less water use, and so on and so forth in the production. So when you're a big purchaser, you can dictate these conditions. And in the nuclear industry, this is the best I've come up with, and you probably, most of you know already this, in Nuclear Europe is a trade group in Europe for nuclear industry. And this is what they've identified as the ways in which the nuclear industry can go towards circularity. And I will not go further on this because I'm probably going to make mistakes in making statements, but some of it is very obvious, right? And so when you're doing the operational plan for a plant, if we're talking about a nuclear power plant, or the decommissioning plant, at that point we have to think about circularity already, right? So it's not something we do after we've built everything, we think about circularity. Everything has to happen at the design phase and the planning phase, right? Okay, so with that, a bit of an introduction. So, Harut? Yeah, please. Yeah, please. Please. Yes. Yes.
So thank you for this very nice introduction. I think it's aligned very well with what we have been discussing, but broadly the perspective. I just want to make one comment in terms of these stressors. When you mentioned that radioactivity is one that candidate to enter the novel entities, and we could talk about POP, PFAS, but radioactivity is there since the beginning of the Earth, so it's not necessarily a novel entity, right? And it's like being involved. And this is essentially the big problem that we have to do in the nuclear field, because many people do not understand that they are already exposed to even high levels of radioactivity, and the man-made exposure is absolutely insignificant in relation, for example, to some areas like in Iran. There are colleagues from Iran here, also in Brazil. So these areas of high natural radioactivity is and the impact of a nuclear in the man life is absolutely, I will not say negligible, but almost close to that. And the people get very much influenced by the issues of accidents. But even though, in terms of accidents, we think about Fukushima, there was no death caused by ionizing radiation associated with the acid accident in Fukushima. And in regard to the waste, which was very well addressed, there are really firm solutions for that. And I'm not advocating nuclear by any means, I'm just bringing evidence. And in terms for radioactive waste, it's much more a matter of perception than a matter of lack of technological solution. And this is what we need to work and make it clear. And of course, establish discussions and open conversations with the population. And Katrina talked about one way to do that. And I just wanted to add this observations. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, any other questions from my part of the presentation? It was very high level, sorry, but that's where I am. I'm in the clouds, so. And now he's going to bring us down to the ground a little bit more.
Not very much down, but still somehow in clouds. Good morning, I'm Harutsun Alpezan. I'm with the Acopian Center for the Environment at the IAEA. I work on the projects on waste and circular economy. I manage projects and I also teach subject on waste and circular economy. So this will be a very brief overview, again, very high level overview of what is going on with as we call it, waste, electric and electronic equipment, globally and locally. I'll provide some insights on what is going on in Armenia too. So first of all, what do we mean by we? This is, of course, this is very much dependent on the legislation, the domestic legislation. EU has, if we focus on EU, the directive on e-waste categorizes the waste electronic equipment in the 6 categories. They just revised it recently. So basically, it's large equipment. Something that, okay, I'll go from the first point, of course. Temperature exchange equipment. This is AC and other like stuff. Screens, monitors, and equipment containing screens, not large, like greater than 100 square centimeters. Lamps, large equipment, big things. And by the way, category 4 includes solar panels and other things. Like this is where you find big equipment, big devices. And then small equipment and small IT and electrocommunication, which excludes 1, 2, 3, and 4, I guess. Yeah, everything. So, but again, this is very much dependent on the domestic legislation, what you include and what you not include. Actually, batteries and accumulators, they often are excluded from this waste stream. So it sounds kind of weird because, you know, those are like things that are directly connected to electric devices, right? Electronic devices. But actually the broad definition of waste electronic equipment is that it's waste of something that you plug into a power source or you use batteries to, you know, enable. All right. So how much waste we're talking about? Alan brought some figures. If you remember, this, oh no, that was the extraction rate, of course. But yeah, we're talking about nearly 62 million tons. Okay, 60 to 70 million tons of waste generated globally annually. Yeah. And the pace is really high. The rates are growing. Actually, we're talking all the time about digital transformation, right? Digital transformation necessarily, you know, assumes electronification, what we call it, and this is more and more waste. So if we want to go digital, growing e-waste is inevitable. You see the regional distribution by 2022 of e-waste generated and collected. So green is the documented, collected and recycled waste per capita. This is very important because e-waste is the sector where we see probably the most of informal activities. Like it is mostly handled informally. We should keep in mind e-waste has value most of the times. Either it is a reuse value or it is material value. And it cannot be just, it cannot remain in landfills. Whatever, this is my like dogma, I all the time tell this to students, whatever has value will not remain in a landfill or somewhere. But the problem is that the treatment itself. So disassembly, if it's done in an environmentally sound manner, if people recover critical materials, valuable materials from waste, what is happening to the rest? This is the question. And this is where we see the most unsafe and environmentally not sound, unsound treatment. So if we look to the composition, and this is where we can talk about circularity. So we see 50%, half of the e-waste is metals. And this is absolutely like recoverable thing, right? And this is what people are going for, going after. 27% plastics. I'm not sure if everything here is recyclable, and 23 other materials, including toxic materials, hazardous waste, etc. And this is where we have the biggest problem. And this 23% of other materials and 27% of plastics, because again, these plastics are very often not recoverable or not recovered. I highlighted the aspect of documented and formal treatment, formal handling of waste. You see, it's only 14 million tons, actually 14 million tons of e-waste that is formally collected and recycled in an environmentally sound manner. The rest is informal, really. It's collected and recycled out of formal systems. And part of it disposed to landfills, just as it is. Now, if we go back to, if we come to the economic value of e-waste, this is what has been registered globally. We see 28 billion USD from recovered metals, and obviously, yeah, this is what attracts people and industries if it's done formally. And we have a 23 billion USD of monetized value by avoiding greenhouse gases. And then on the part of cost, you see just the treatment. This is the real cost, like you pay the companies to treat, and then this is the cost of logistics and treatment itself. And then 78 billion is estimation for the externalized cost. If we add up all of this, there is a negative like 37 billion cost still we have in the industry. And we can assess the potential, of course, for circular economy and economic value from circular economy. If we formalize everything and if we treat everything, there is a great potential.
So Howard, just
Yes.
one clarification. The 78 billion would go down if those informal and
Yes.
disposals were actually processed.
Yes, exactly. Some of it will, of course, some of this 78 will go to the formal cost of treatment. Right. So come back, I don't know why I'm coming back all the time, but anyway, coming to the power industry. As I mentioned, the category 4 includes the solar panels, and again, this is not a surprise, I guess, that something is going on with the slide. But this is the figure for 2022. It's only less than around 500,000 tons. But by 2030, the estimation, and this is, I guess, very precise estimation. I guess this is what we can really calculate. It will, increase 4 times by 2030. But still, photovoltaic panels are not the major, not in any way a major kind of contributor to this stream. We still have this small equipment. This is pretty much like phones and computers, everything, yeah? And then large equipment and that contributes the most. Yeah, I guess I talked about this. No surprise, the formal collection happens in Europe and Americas, Oceania, yeah. And let's skip this because I guess we don't have much time. Okay, what about policies? So this is the picture of how what's going on the policy side globally. So who is familiar with the extended producer responsibility policies? 2 or 3 people. So one of the most effective tools, policy tools around the world is the extended producer responsibility, which doesn't cover only electronic and electric waste, but wastes in general. It covers some a list of products that become the responsibility of their producers or importers. Technically speaking, those who put these products on market. And you see 67 countries have this EPR regulations and provisions on e-waste through EPR. Of course, other kind of regulations are also possible, but EPR proved to be the most, I think, effective tool, efficient tool of this. If we zoom into the CIS and Armenia, the region, this is the picture who has what in terms of legislation, and we're happy with this upcoming reform. We're going to adopt the extended producer responsibility system and policy by the next year, and this is part of comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement that we have signed with Europe, with EU. So we're obliged, no way to skip this. So if we talk about Armenia specifically, we're not a big generator of e-waste. If you compare to Russia, this is 100 times less, in absolute numbers. It's only 15,000 tons of e-waste we produced in 2021. And per capita, we are also not big producers, really, as citizens. Today we have one that's specifically for locals. This is a good news. We have one retailer, one store chain, an importer of electric equipment that acquired license recently, and they have started take back and collection of different household appliances. They're more or less focused on washing machines and things like that. The only problem is we don't have developed infrastructure for proper treatment of things that remain after you recover metal, this PCB boards, etc., circuit boards, etc., etc. But we have very well developed heritage kind of system practice of repair, which is very circular. This is where Europe actually wants to move back the repair, culture, repair practice, repair infrastructure. We repair pretty much, everything. Even though, even in Armenia, some appliances they become very, very affordable, so people choose to buy new instead of repairing the old one, and the quality of appliances also go down, of course. We don't have waste imports. There is no registered e-waste, so it's not. We're not part of that issue, but that issue exists, of course. I think 60% of e-waste generated is informally and illegally kind of shipped internationally. We don't have national e-waste standards, but the good news is that e-waste is now part of the list of wastes and hazardous waste. Formal collection happening, poor treatment and residual and non-recyclable materials, And there is no e-waste data reporting and collection targets, but this is upcoming. We will have it through the extended producer responsibility system. And there is an issue with slides, I guess. Again, this is just a list of e-waste related international conventions. And recently we actually signed this agreement, not recently, in 2018, we signed this Dushanbe agreement on e-waste, which is part of Eurasian Union. So there is something going on. And one of the results was that we added the electric equipment to the list of wastes. At least we have that waste stream now. Because before, if legally it's not recognized as waste, the treatment, there is no formal obligation and legal obligation or procedures on treatment. So it's not a waste, even if it is in fact, right? Okay, this is pretty much it. It's a small advertisement of our program. We through a Swedish-funded 4-year program, we actually provide technical assistance to the Ministry of Environment in developing this policy on extended producer responsibility. Thank you. I hope this was helpful. Yes?
Thank you for interesting presentation. I would like to inform that now we are working on the reviewing the atomic law in Republic of Armenia, and we are thinking it should be in the law that the polluter pays principle will be applied in nuclear energy field also. So it is the requested from the Joint Commission, which is adopted by Parliament of the Republic of Armenia, and we are providing some report every 3 years. One also.
May I ask a follow-up question on this? Would this mean that the cost of energy produced by the nuclear power plant will include the remediation and the cost of treatment and damage and the externalities? Because SEPA requires full cost recovery through polluter pays principle. So would polluter be paying the full cost of treatment and environmental damage?
Should.
So
the question is about polluter pays principle. It's stipulated on the strategy of management radioactive waste in Armenia. So the strategy was developed in 2000. From 2015, we provided to government. In that time, I was in ministry and I was co-author of the strategy. It was adopted in 2019, but unfortunately, due to COVID and due to some our local support, it was postponed. Now I'm in regulatory authority, and we are reviewing the law on atomic energy, and we will include it in the law. The question, one more remark about the solar panels. When we trying to promote the solar energy in Armenia from 2015, we think about that taking into account that the solar panels lifetime, it's almost about 20 years. So we marked it that we should think about the waste from the solar panels?
Yes, thank you for bringing this up. The extended producer responsibility exactly addresses exactly this issue. So the producer, like we don't have, yeah, we do have actually producers, they do assembly of photovoltaic. So producers and importers of photovoltaic panels, they will pay in advance, just when they actually sell their photovoltaic panels. The moment they sell, they put on market, they will pay the cost of the recycling, the collection and recycling, full cost, to some organization, a private organism, like private sector-led organization, that will be responsible for handling those panels, and state will be monitoring the whole thing, how it is happening. So the cost of panels actually will include the treatment, the final end-of-life treatment of the panels. And in case of photovoltaic panels, it is much easier because this is not a phone, or it's not a portable battery that actually goes out of control once you sell it. The photovoltaics, they can't, you know, they are very much under control, right? Especially utility scale. If we talk utility scale, after decommissioning, it's there, and the producer may be individually even responsible for their treatment. So it's part of the policy.
It should be part of the
Yeah,
policy.
it is part of the policy. So
Thank you.
Ministry of Environment is considering that as part of the policy.
Thank you again. Another presentation that suits very well, fits very well the kind of things we are discussing. I hope that you can appreciate that. My question to you is about, I'm not an economist at all, far from that. But one of the things that strike me is when you talk about repairing where the are going to, in kind of putting emphasis on repairing them, but to produce new materials. And also when we expand that thinking about the circularity, also there will be some agents that might suffer with that policy, because if something will go in one direction, the other one will see the consequences. And I wonder if there is any study if the new economy will be able to replace the old one by shifting to this side instead of producing more. And that brings me to another question, is the waste paradox. Because at the moment, some of the recycling is possible because the waste is not commoditized. But when the waste becomes a commodity and has a price attached to that, then the economy of recycling might be shifted. So I wonder if there is any consideration, any thoughts about those things, or if this is completely out of the blue.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. I can't actually point out any study, but I believe, I strongly believe there are studies assessing the economic impact. And you're absolutely right. I mean, someone will lose in this, but overall, yeah, the shift is necessary just because of the planetary boundaries, etc., etc. Yeah, I can look to some reports and recommend something. There should be studies. I mean, this is something that all economists are looking to anyway. I mean, the governments, and this is part of the debate. Circular economy can be very costly. The transition can be very costly for some, and some will lose for sure. But we should kind of avoid the overproduction and overconsumption of goods.
A follow-up question: when you mentioned about the solar panel, that when the producer sells the solar panel, it will automatically make payment for somebody to take care of the waste. is it implicitly in the or explicitly in the policy that treatment is recycling or disposal?
No, it's not implicit, of course. It can be a safe storage for, I don't know, 10 years or something. Of course, the policy should deal with the reality. So I'm not sure, and this is a good question, and for a study actually, if local domestic recycling of
We'll be able to deal.
yes will be viable,
Excellent.
economically viable or something.
Excellent. The final comment, when I look to the cascade, I get traumatized because my colleague Katrinel asked me to go up twice already. So my legs are really in bad shape.
Do less trauma, maybe.
But I'm getting, in a good shape.
Course doesn't leave an opportunity to point that out. Katrina, you've caused him some trauma. He needs to pay for some therapy after this. Okay, so now, the extended producer responsibility in your countries, you might be introducing them, you might already have them. And so it's a tool of kind of promoting circularity in the economy. And so now we're going to the power sector in Armenia and the investments they're making, and especially through the World Bank. We want to see how they're introducing these concepts of circularity in this big power infrastructure investments. Yeah. So Gor Khachaturian is our colleague from the World Bank. He focuses on the energy sector at the World Bank. That's his portfolio. Thank you, Gor, for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion, how to integrate circular economy principles into decommissioning and environmental remediation projects. I will be focusing on energy perspectives. I picked up 2 specific projects we are currently working on, and to present the challenges and opportunities, of course, for integration of circular economy principles. Just to tell about, to reflect on Mr. Fernandez's question about a possible study. I believe, I haven't read that study, but I believe there was a reference to this Ellen MacArthur Foundation study about the potential of economic benefits of circular economy, and there was assessment about 4.5 trillion US dollars if the potential of the current status of if the circular economy will be integrated into all sectors. The reference was in EU policy papers when they announced that they would like to double by 2030 the economic benefits from circular economy. So I believe that there is some kind of data simulation that we can trust there, and at least the structure of that report can be considered. Let me. What does this mean for Armenia? Of course, for the new projects like how presented, it's easier to establish legal regulatory frameworks which can already predict the final stage happenings of new initiatives. This is, I think, in energy sector, this calls for attention for wind, which will be new. Although we have about 10 years, 1 or 2 operating wind farms, but this is not in the culture, and this is not kindly grid-supported measures, and then this is in stage, like we have been for solar in, let's say, 2016, 2017, where there was no solar, and at the same time it grew up during these recent years tremendously, and data is telling what we will have. By the end of this year, already more than 10% of generation of solar. This is our, let's say, generation mix in energy. And as you can see, still the renewables does not compensate the conventional ways of electricity generation in Armenia. Conventional means for us nuclear and thermal power plant, of course. And renewables include large hydropower plants, small hydropower plants, and mainly solar. So from the circular economy perspective, I already mentioned that the potential for the integration of the circular economy principles is big, especially for wind. For solar, it was mentioned by Haru, some kind of organizations are already done, classification of the waste, further proceedings, and of course the big issue will be thermal power plant. You can see what we have thermal power plants, which only two of them we can consider as newly capacitized for about 20 years life cycle from today. All others, they are still partially operating or kept as a reserves, and we are in a different stages of decommissioning planning. So what does this mean for power sector decommissioning of such large facilities? It's not only metal, it's not only wires or this, let's say, tough real materials which can be processed both locally and abroad, but there are also oil containers with pretty much old, more than 40-50 years old oils where PCBs and other not allowed, even materials that can are used. For current ones, of course, there is this recycling process, there is a rehabilitation process, and this is pretty much organized within in-house capacities, let's say. But what are they going to do, especially facing the challenges? We are a landlocked country, we have transportation issues, locked for hazardous waste international transportation, and we are pretty small to build economically viable and reasonable capacities here for further proceedings for this waste. So if we can see that, we have, apart from generation companies, we have also transmission and distribution companies, which again face these problems, especially for old transformers and old equipments, heritage from Soviet times. But there is no clear strategy, there is no clear waste management plan, and I'm not talking about the circularity or integrating of any circularity principles in this regard. So more or less understanding the current status of energy sector in terms of how it is far from circular economy and how it's lacking waste management principles, I would like to jump just directly to projects that we are in initiation or in a kickoff phases. One is this Yerevan thermal power plant, which is a key generation company for Armenia, not only because it generates about 10-12% of overall electricity production of Armenia, but it serves at the same time as a balancing power for the electricity market. So, which means that whenever electricity is required, the first addressee of this issue is Yerevan Thermal Power Center. This is a state-owned enterprise, state-owned company. So whatever solution can be tailored and found for Yerevan thermal power plant, can be somehow upscaled also to other thermal power plants, pretty much older than Yerevan thermal power plant. Just to avoid from confusion, Yerevan thermal power plant was rehabilitated, and the current one does not face much, let's say, environmental issues, but there is also old one which is not completely decommissioned. The point is that the old one was designed to serve mainly to a chemical power plant, and you can imagine how many pipes and connections are connected to that chemical plant, which is not operating anymore. And there are huge risks, not only for, let's say, asbestos oils and to go to the soil and contaminate also soil, but also there is a risk just to keep from vandalism, from just let's say simple thief who does not properly take care. If they are just stealing metals, they don't care what kind of oils they are pouring out, or etc. So these are costs, and earlier decommissioning strategy, earlier integration into a circular economy will mean less costs. In this case, in Yerevan thermal power plant, less cost for state budget at the same time, because of course still they can somehow compensate thanks to the new thermal power plant generation, thanks to the money from that generation, somehow to compensate and keep this property, but it can't last forever. I mean, so this is a reason why it's our target to effectively, let's say, plan environmental management and at the same time to provide lessons learned to the institutions, to especially environmental ministry, for a new regulation and guidelines which can be adopted by all other key actors in the sector. Just briefly summarize the challenges for this kind of entities. It's of course, as I told, this heavy fuel oil, lubricating oils, transformer oils, so hydrocarbons, aromatic, which are very, let's say, strictly prohibited for use, but they have, and it's not directly foreseen how they can be used in our industry, how they can be part of circular economy and circular principles, but at the same time, the proper management, proper waste management of these types of oils, first of all, means separation and classification, which will allow further easier smoother transformation to the circular principles in other industries. Another one is not so, let's say, large and tremendous, is high voltage electric network, which is key institute for energy sector for Armenia, because this is the only transmission company in Armenia. This is again state-owned enterprise. Our focus is implementing effective waste management strategy here, particularly for hazardous waste like used transformer oils, lead batteries, and of course asbestos waste, because there are also civil constructions where which they have to rehabilitate and adapt to new realities. We are, of course, committed to adopt international best practices, and in addition to this waste management here, HVAN is working separately to integrate circular economy principles into all the operations. This involves, of course, maximizing the reuse of recycling materials and developing sustainable business models for in compliant with Armenian Green Growth goals. What HMS also aims to enhance environmental performance and contribute to Armenia's sustainable development. In both strategic planning, let's say stakeholder engagement and adherence to regularity requirements, HMS aims to address environmental challenges and promote this sustainable development. So they need, of course, investments. And the main challenge both for YTPC and HMN again is lack of commercially oriented business entities who are dealing with contamination of waste, with waste management, with specific classification. And it's not only about regulations and legal acts, it's about making this business. As I mentioned in the beginning, there is a large potential, as Harut mentioned, in billions, as overall assessment is telling trillions. So how to make this for business attractive, because for transportation, for reserve, for all other aspects, especially in such small countries like Armenia is, you need to gain from the scale. So here is that business needs to step in, and there is a need promoting, facilitating legal and regulatory framework, which at least will allow these business entities to operate in the market, but at the same time will make it somehow lucrative that they will be interested. For oils, for batteries, for lead batteries, for all equipment that are used by energy, because we are going to have more and more this waste, especially if AI technologies grow, with more energy is needed and more equipment is needed, better and more capacitized transmission companies are required and distribution ones. Whatever we have currently, there is an urgent need to analyze, to develop a proper waste management plan, which will later be used also for integration of circular economy principles into overall cycle. This much. I have prepared a couple of slides if you would like to go deeper into the projects that we have initiated. Unfortunately, I'm not an environmental specialist. I can't address very technically, but at least I hope I will answer from a financial perspective and from a business perspective of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Horst, do you want to ask any questions, anyone?
Actually, I have many, not questions, but ideas. The first comment I want to make is essentially that for the participants in this training event, many of the things that we have been discussing, I think that you saw here, that specifically, if you think about this diagram that I mentioned of the decommissioning, remediation, waste management, how these things are integrated, it appeared clearly in the slide. But my question to you is specifically from the financial point of view, what is the particularly role of the World Bank in supporting the projects that you have mentioned? It provides not only financial support, but I think that also includes technical support by means of providing environmental impact studies. And how does you build this network to support these projects in the national context?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Yeah, any project before on its initiation stage at the World Bank needs to carry out environmental and social assessment.
True. your own personal, or you are?
No. World Bank carries out on its own financial resources, on its own human resources.
But you have
any
consultants that work for the World Bank, or you have the own personnel that carry on these studies?
Pardon, can you repeat?
These studies you implement through experts that work for the World Bank, or you have your own team of staff members that do that kind of assessment?
Mostly we have them, but for specific projects, like if it would be, let's say, nuclear, unfortunately we don't finance nuclear, or fortunately, I don't know. But for this kind of specific projects, or let's say if the target is to clean up chemical power plant, like we have, like I told now, the Tier 1 thermal power plant was connected to and was mainly serving to very specific contamination waste management issues. Of course, we are integrating experts from outside, but mostly for overall environmental and social assessment, we rely on our own experts. An initiative is coming from a partner country. First document that needs to be produced is environmental and social studies. We have two kinds of operations in this regard. When there is this direct investment plan, when our specialists are taking care for whole life cycle of a project, for environmental and social aspects, and even after the project implementation, until the government or a counterpart municipality is paying back the loan of the World Bank, this process is ongoing, and there is a need for feedback for environmental and social issues. Just an example, we have completed the project last year, and under the project, 2 substations of high voltage electrical have not been completed. Still, our environmental and social specialists, quarterly or monthly basis, depends on what's going on there, because on one side the works are suspended, and on the other side they are still ongoing. They visit, they take measures, they carry out activities to make sure that both environmental and social aspects are present. Another approach, we call it program for results, which relies completely on the legal and regulatory arrangements of a country, partner country, receiving country, borrower country. And for specific sectors, we have also this experience in Armenia, but we have also this kind of projects, initiatives in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in post-Soviet countries, many, which is a bit different from the traditional one. When I told them that our environmental and social experts are carrying out activities during the whole life cycle of the project. In this case, our experts are assessing the legal and regulatory framework, the institutional framework of a country, and based on this assessment, they are giving yes or no, yes with reservations, no with reservations for a project, which means a good step forward, because countries themselves are establishing the institutional framework, which are not responsible for only specific project implemented by the World Bank or only specific financial flows for investments by the World Bank, but overall for the sector or for the industry, or at least for some minor branch of any industry. So this is critical. This is even more critical than pure financial, let's say, or economic outputs of a project.
One more question, if I may. You mentioned that you don't finance, you don't fund projects in nuclear, right?
Correct.
But I'm aware that you have funded projects in Argentina, in one mining site, and also in Kyrgyzstan, in Manisu, that was about relocation of legacy tailings. So my question to you is, number one, what is the boundary of nuclear for you? And if we are talking about legacy mining sites, even if uranium, is it possible to get funding from World Bank to deal with these projects, or at least get the assistance from the technical assistance of the World Bank on how to build a proposal for obtaining funding to deal with these legacy sites? Sorry to explore you once you are here.
No worries. Yeah, because it's Armenia also has a nuclear potential. They also are looking for investment needs for a new nuclear power plant and also renovation, rehabilitation of the current one. So this was in my personal radar, and this is among the expenditure lines which are prohibited for the World Bank. In line, let's say, like tobacco industry or alcohol industry, in this kind. So it's not about the carbon, because there is no carbon for nuclear or emissions. It's purely about the complete cycle of environmental aspect. I think it might be changed. If all questions are answered, it might be changed, I believe. But this is the current status.
No, but the question is, the boundary for nuclear is the nuclear power plant, and excludes, for example, the front end mining, or it's everything, all the nuclear cycle?
Oh, I'm not aware about mining, honestly, but nuclear power plant and nuclear energy, let's put like this, and any facilities directly associated with this are excluded.
Thank you.
Yes. In waste management of battery, lithium-ion battery or sodium-ion battery, what will we do in nuclear battery, like nano-tritium?
I don't know, honestly. The point is that if
specific technology
yeah.
that needs a special treatment, and so the question is how does
I thought for Armenia case, yeah, we have this regional, let's say, issues, because we are landlocked. We don't have, we have temporary reserves for all kind of waste, but we don't have final, let's say, understanding how it's going to be reserved and utilized and etc. So I know that there are facilities in Russia, Canada does this, yeah, but we have problems with transportation, I believe. I'm not aware, and unfortunately I'm not expert in this.
Thank you. I have a question. What you showed is a waste management plan, environmental risk management plan. How does the World Bank inject kind of the circular economy aspect in all of this? Because what you're saying is standard procedure now, everyone does it. Especially if it has international funding behind it, they have to do it. But how do then those oils and treatment of those oils or those materials that are left over, kind of putting it back into economic use, or reducing their impact on productive land or water and so on and so forth? So how does the World Bank promote that transition in thinking, not just environmental risk management, but also the circular economy?
Yeah. Thank you, that's a good question, because we just introduced this year our new scorecard, which is kind of qualifying our projects in terms of different measures and aspects, and one of them is, of course, reflection of circularity. And unfortunately, so far, all the projects that we were dealing with were looked only specifically, let's say, rehabilitation of substations. There are transformers, old ones. What are you going to do with them? To just leave it or dismantle it? Of course, we are negotiating and promoting that the best scenario is that you don't want it. Yeah, unfortunately, there is war and there is a need even for old ones, both in Russia and Ukraine. So if you can sell it all over this old one, do it as a whole transformer. If no, then sell to the one who is capable to
dismantle and use it and to go to a final stage. But this is, I would say, what we need a more systemic approach in this regard and more indicators to assess this approach and to bring it to more, let's say, economic, rational.
Any other questions, anyone? Yeah.
I have a question which is more general about circular economy and all the presentations. It seems to me that circular economy puts a lot of focus on the economy and the environment. So how do you see the inclusion of social aspects, especially considering that circular economy is also seen as a way to support sustainability?
Should I take that, or start at least? I don't think a circular economy has said a lot about social inclusion. It's mostly wealthy countries feeling good about themselves, that they're doing something about the planet, but social inclusion, I think, in the concepts like the donut economics, that's where they're brought into, and the SDGs, or that's how they're brought in. But circular economy by itself, I don't know, Harut, Agor, if you've come across, I haven't seen that social inclusion element discussed. Yeah, but I mean, any economic activity has some job creation, job disruption, so. In fact, if anything, it makes it more knowledge-based and requiring higher skills. And so you might think that poor communities with inadequate education may be left out, right? So there's that aspect, I think, to challenge the circular economy creates, because it's a very knowledge-intensive process, right? Yeah. I don't know if you guys want to add something.
Previously, we had cases when, let's say, dismantled equipment or wood was used for like firewood or etc. But this is not in the context of circularity. This is just a pure social action without properly assessing the circularity, let's say, outcome. So yeah, I think Alan's conclusion is the most rational.
There are specific cases I know where, for instance, there's this 55 megawatt solar power plant being built, and so a lot of the cables come with this spools, big kind of wooden stuff, and then once they're done, that wood part, components are then given to villagers, and most of them evidently don't burn it. They create beehives, but that's just a very minor, Systemically, I haven't seen any analysis of inclusion. We have about 3 or 4 new countries, people participating, 3 or 4 from 3 or 4 countries who are building new nuclear power plants, right? Uzbekistan, Egypt, right? You're building a new one, yeah? Turkey, yeah. Bangladesh. And Turkey will be their first one, right? Yeah. Brazil already has one, so 2.